Hello, I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico. Let's talk New Mexico history. Where have all the documents gone? As a historian and a genealogist, I'm often asked, why can't I find certain records? Why can't I find my ancestors in the church documents or civil archives of various places in New Mexico or Spain? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, let's look at some general explanations as to why there are certain documents that are missing. First of all, these documents don't last forever, although paper has shown itself to be quite resilient. Still, there's elements in time and history that have done away with a lot of our past. So first of all, climate and weather. Climate and weather have done a lot of damage to documents, sometimes making them illegible, destroying them over the centuries. Moisture, heat, dry weather have a lot to do with documents just really disappearing into the air, falling apart, becoming piles of dust. So we're lucky that we have some documents. When I've done research in Spain, I've seen some documents that go back to the 800s, the 900s, and they're beautiful documents that have been well preserved. But human frailty also has a part in the destruction and disappearing of documents. Things like fire, smoking around documents, that damages the paper, it damages the ink. Archives catching fire by accident, that destroys documents and leaves us with no more history for certain archives or certain communities. Warfare, terrible destruction, archives, churches, government buildings, documents are just obliterated by the horrors of war. Also, just people doing things like taking documents, removing documents, stealing documents. So these are some of the reasons why we don't have certain documents to research anymore. Think about how long human history has been around. For the better part of some 5,000 years. Think of that, the time that has passed, the events of human history that have occurred, and how so much of our history has been lost because documents have just gone poof for all of these or some of these reasons. In New Mexico, we've had similar challenges. We know that the Spanish arrived in the late 1500s. They kept great records, the chroniclers and the priests, but still there were certain events that led to the destruction of documents. The colony of New Mexico was established in 1598, and records started to be kept. We still have some, thanks to the archives in Mexico City, the Archivo General de la Nación. There's Inquisition documents, government documents, social, economic, political history. A lot of our history is in Mexico City and also in some archives in places like Zacatecas and in Parral in Chihuahua. But in New Mexico, the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, which was a war between the Spanish and the Pueblos, resulted in the destruction of most of the documents before 1680. So most of that history is lost. The exiled colony that was in Guadalupe del Paso, that's now Juarez in Mexico, they kept records between 1680 and 1692. So we have some records there that piece together our history in that time period. And of course, with the Vargas reconquest between 1692 and 1696, obviously there's a lot of records. They've been preserved, the journals of Vargas, and have resulted in the amazing Vargas journals from the Vargas Project at UNM from a few years back. So we have a lot of records from that point on. Church records were also destroyed in the Pueblo Revolt. Yet there are blanks or spaces. There are years where we can't find baptisms, marriages, burial records. We don't find any church records in New Mexico until about the 1720s. The Albuquerque records are pretty complete. The church records, they start around 1706 when it was established. But there are many reasons for that. Perhaps there were floods that destroyed documents, maybe fires, maybe abuse of documents. Perhaps there were people who stole the documents or used them for other purposes. What's interesting when you look at the Spanish archives of New Mexico, which are housed at the New Mexico State Record Center and Archives in Santa Fe, there are actually indexes of the archives of New Mexico throughout the colonial period. It's great because you can look at lists of what the archives contained and see what we still have and what we no longer have, which is sad, but part of history. The Spanish archives of New Mexico are divided into two parts. Spanish Archives of New Mexico 1 and Spanish Archives of New Mexico 2. One has to do with generally with land and water, but you'll also find wills and other documents in there. And then the part 2 are all the other documents, wills, sales, criminal proceedings, records, and correspondence with Mexico City to the south. It's a treasure of documents. Now, we also have our Mexican archives of New Mexico, the Mexican period documents, which also help us get a grip on our Mexican period. But guess what? Our church records are fairly complete, but there's gaps. There's gaps. One of the most frustrating things is when you're, myself included, when you're doing your research, your genealogy, and you get to San Juan Pueblo, now Okeawinge, but San Juan in the late 1700s to the early 1800s, the marriage records are gone. There's about a 30 or 40-year gap. And I have ancestors going back there, and I can't find records that would get my ancestry back. I mean, they're New Mexicans. I pretty much know what their ancestry is, but still, it'd be nice to have those records. Where did they go? Who knows? There's 1 or 2 books that are missing. Did a priest take them south? Will they turn up again? Will a family show up at the archives of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe or New Mexico State Record Center and Archives with these books? There's always that hope, right? But you never know. They may never turn up. But that's part of history. The good news is humans always leave a footprint wherever they go. So you could look at census records, baptismal records, all kinds of other records to try to piece together that human story that tells us who we are. So this has just been a brief discussion on our documents here in New Mexico. But it happens everywhere. In Mexico, in Spain, I've done research in both of those places, and there's gaps in documents there too for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Nonetheless, it's an amazing adventure and it's fun to do. And there's something about not knowing that I kind of like. I mean, like all of you out there, I want to know it all, right? We want to know everything. And yet there's something about that mystery that keeps us going, because that's part of the enjoyment too. Not just discovering that treasure about our ancestry or our community history, but also the quest, the adventure of trying to find it, trying to learn, and learning more about our history. So that's it for now. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time. Hasta pronto. Goodbye.